The fuel light came on somewhere past Ludlow, and I kept driving anyway. I had maybe 30 miles left in the tank, probably less. The Honda had been burning oil for 2 weeks, and I hadn't dealt with it because I'd been too busy trying to figure out which of my neighbors had talked to William Mills and whether he knew I was still crashing at the apartment on 7th. Turned out he did know. My landlord told me that part on Tuesday when I came back from the grocery store and found her waiting by my door with her arms crossed and this look on her face that said she was done pretending I'd catch up on rent. She said a guy had come by asking questions. Tall, built, scar through his eyebrow. She didn't give him my unit number, but she didn't have to. William was the kind of guy who'd just wait in the parking lot until he saw me. So I threw my stuff in a duffel bag and left. That was 2 days ago. I'd been zigzagging east on back highways since then, sleeping in the car at rest stops, buying gas $10 at a time, and trying not to think about how fast I was running out of options. The sun dropped behind the hills, and the desert went purple, then gray, then black. I had the windows cracked because the AC didn't work, and the air smelled like dust and creosote and hot asphalt. My phone was at 8%. I'd turned off location services somewhere around Barstow, but I still didn't trust it. William had people. He'd found me 3 times already, and I'd only dodged him because I had a bad habit of leaving jobs early and avoiding my own apartment. Not exactly a sustainable strategy. The road curved, and I saw a green sign that said Amboy, population 4. Then another quarter-mile, and there it was. Roy's Motel and Cafe, lit up like a beacon in the middle of absolutely nothing. I slowed down. The place looked like a postcard from 1950-something. Single-story motel in an L shape, maybe 10 rooms total, painted white but dingy under the floodlights. The cafe was attached on the left side with big windows and a neon sign that said open. There was an old Texaco station out front with the vintage pump still standing, though I couldn't tell if they worked. No other cars in the lot, no other buildings anywhere. Just desert and highway and this one bright, lonely spot. I pulled in and killed the engine. For a second, I just sat there. My hands were shaking a little. Adrenaline, probably, or caffeine. I'd been drinking gas station coffee for 2 days straight and sleeping in 40-minute intervals, and every time I saw headlights in my rear view, I thought it was William. I wanted empty highway. I wanted a few days where nobody could find me, where I could think for 5 minutes without looking over my shoulder. Maybe pick up some cash work, figure out my next move, disappear for a week. This place looked empty enough. I grabbed my duffel bag from the passenger seat and got out. The air was cooler now, dry and still. I could hear my boots on the gravel and nothing else, not a soul around. The cafe door had a little bell that jangled when I pushed it open. Inside, it was brighter than I expected. White tile floors, red vinyl booths, a long counter with stools bolted to the floor. Everything was clean but worn, like someone had been taking care of it for decades, and it was just finally starting to show its age. There was a jukebox in the corner that wasn't playing anything. Smelled like coffee and fryer grease. A woman stood behind the counter writing something in a ledger. She looked up when I walked in. 40-something, maybe older. Auburn hair pulled back tight, hazel eyes, sharp jaw. She wore a plain gray blouse and dark slacks and had a ring of keys clipped to her belt. She didn't smile. "Help you?" she said. I walked up to the counter and set my bag down. My pitch was half-formed, but I'd been thinking about it for the last 10 miles. I needed this to work. "Hey," I said. "I'm looking for work, and a place to stay, short-term." She looked at me for a second. Not suspicious exactly, just assessing. "What kind of work?" "Anything," I said. "I've done kitchens, stocking, some front desk stuff. I'm good with my hands. I don't need much. Just a few days." "You running from something?" The question was flat, no judgment in it, just practical. I hesitated. Then I figured lying wouldn't help. "Yeah." "Law?" "No, just a guy I owe money to." She nodded like that made sense. She closed the ledger and leaned against the counter, studying me. ID, she said. I pulled out my wallet and handed her my driver's license. She looked at it, looked at me, then wrote my name down on a notepad. Blake Barnes. She didn't write down the license number or anything else. Just the name. You ever work night desk? She asked. Once. Motel outside Fresno. Couple months. Why'd you leave? Owner sold it. She handed my license back. I'm Deborah Meyer. I manage this property. We've got a night position open. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. You'd check in guests if any show up, answer the phone, keep the place secure. There's a cot in the back office. You can sleep there between your shifts. $70 a night, cash, and you can use the cafe kitchen to make your own food as long as you clean up after. $70 a night wasn't great, but it was better than sleeping in my car and burning through what little cash I had left, and nobody would think to look for me here. William didn't even know I'd left the state. Okay, I said. Yeah, I'll take it. Deborah didn't move. She just kept looking at me. There are rules, she said. Sure. I'm serious. This isn't the kind of place where you can just figure it out as you go. You follow the rules exactly, or you leave. Understood? Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten a little, but I nodded. Understood. She reached under the counter and pulled out a laminated sheet of paper. It was the size of a menu, printed in black text on white. She slid it across to me. Read it, she said. Twice. I picked it up. Night desk rules. Roy's Motel and Cafe 1. The front door locks at 10 p.m. Do not open it for anyone unless they are a registered guest with a room key or a cafe employee arriving for the morning shift. 2. If someone knocks and asks to use the payphone, tell them it is out of order. 3. Do not leave the front desk unattended between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. 4. If you hear footsteps in the hallway, do not investigate. Wait at the desk. They will stop. 5. Room 7 is always vacant. Do not assign it to a guest under any circumstances. 6. If a guest in room 7 calls the desk, apologize and hang up immediately. Do not go to the room. 7. The cafe jukebox may turn on by itself. Let it play. Do not unplug it. 8. If you see someone standing outside the window, do not make eye contact. They will leave. 9. At 3:15 a.m., check that all hallway lights are functioning. If one is out, replace the bulb from the supply closet before 3:30. 10. Do not go outside after midnight unless the fire alarm sounds. I read it twice, like she said. Then I looked up at her. Is this a prank? No. Her voice was completely level. She wasn't smiling. Wasn't doing that thing people do when they're messing with you and waiting for you to catch on. These rules, I said, they're serious. Yes. What happens if I break one? The building doesn't like mistakes, Deborah said. And it's not forgiving. I stared at her. She stared back. I should have walked out. I should have gotten back in my car and driven until I hit the next town, even if I ran out of gas on the side of the road. But I didn't, because the truth was I didn't have anywhere else to go. William was looking for me and my phone was almost dead and I had maybe $200 left and no plan. I looked down at the laminated rules again. Room 7 is always vacant. Do not assign it to a guest. If you see someone standing outside the window, do not make eye contact. Weird, but not impossible. Maybe the place was haunted. Maybe Deborah was superstitious. Maybe it was some kind of test to see if I'd actually follow instructions. I set the sheet down on the counter. Okay, I said. I'll follow the rules. Deborah nodded once. She reached under the counter again and pulled out a key on a plain metal ring. Back office is through that door. Cot's already set up. Your shift starts in 2 hours. Don't be late. I took the key. That was it. I'd committed. This stopover came with strings attached, and I just agreed to all of them without really understanding what I was signing up for. But I was here now, and I didn't have a better option. Deborah pulled out a second sheet. Not the laminated menu-sized thing from before. This one was smaller, typed on plain white paper, and she slid it across the counter without a word. I picked it up. The header said, "Night Desk Rules, Revised. No date, no explanation. 5 rules this time, just 5. 1. Do not unlock the front door after 12:10 a.m. for any reason. If someone arrives after that time, tell them through the glass that check-in resumes at 6 a.m. 2. If the lobby radio plays track 4, get into the laundry room immediately and hold the door shut from the inside until the song ends. Do not let go of the handle. 3. The guest ledger stays under the counter at all times. Only touch it while wearing blue nitrile gloves from the box beneath the desk. 4. If anyone asks for the payphone, unplug it immediately and place it behind the coffee machine in the cafe. Do not plug it back in until your shift ends. 5. If you see wet footprints with no person attached, pour salt on them. Do not follow them. Do not look for their source. I read it twice. Deborah watched me the whole time, hands folded on the counter. The first set of rules felt strange. These felt different. The 10-rule sheet had that vibe of workplace guidelines someone typed up to cover liability. Weird liability, sure, but still procedural. These 5 didn't read that way. These read like survival instructions, the kind of thing you'd get before going into a structure that wasn't stable. A building inspector once told me about condemned properties where you had to follow protocols to avoid cave-ins or chemical exposure. Steps that kept you alive if you paid attention. That's what this felt like. I set the paper down. "What's track 4? "You'll know it when you hear it," Deborah said. "And the footprints? Wet. No person." "Right." I rubbed my eyes. 2 days of bad sleep were catching up. "Got it." She reached across the counter. "Give me your phone." I blinked. "What?" "Your phone. Hand it over." "Why?" "Signal behaves badly here," she said. Her tone didn't shift. Flat, matter of fact. "You won't get calls out. You won't get anything useful. It'll just sit there pulling battery and making you anxious." I thought about the 8% charge. About William's number blocked, but still somewhere in my call history. About the idea of being completely cut off. "I need it," I said. "You don't. What if something happens?" "Then you handle it," Deborah said. "That's the job." I hesitated. My phone was in my jacket pocket. It was dead weight at this point, basically. But it was still mine. Still the last thread connecting me to anything outside this place. She waited. I pulled it out. The screen was black. I set it on the counter. Deborah took it, walked to the far end of the counter, and opened a drawer I hadn't noticed before. She placed the phone inside, then pulled out a small key and locked it. The key went onto her key ring with a faint metallic click. "You'll get it back when you leave," she said. "When's that?" "Whenever you decide to go." She didn't say if. She said when. I noticed that. Deborah reached under the counter again and came up with 3 things. She set them on the surface between us one at a time. First, a key ring with 2 keys. One looked like a standard office door key. The other was smaller, brass, old. Second, a cardboard box about the size of a shoebox. I could see through the half-open flap, blue nitrile gloves, the kind you'd get at a hardware store or a lab supply place, maybe 100 of them. Third, a roll of salt. Not a normal container. This was the kind of bag you'd use for a water softener or for icing a driveway. 25 pounds, maybe. It had been opened and rolled shut with a binder clip. "Keys are for the office and the laundry room," Deborah said, tapping the ring. "Gloves are under the desk. Use them when you handle the ledger. Salt stays behind the desk, too. You'll need it if you see the footprints." I stared at the salt. How often do I see footprints? Depends on the night. On what? She didn't answer. She just picked up the ledger she'd been writing in earlier and tucked it under her arm. Your shift starts in 90 minutes. I'd suggest you eat something and get your head clear. The cafe's got a few things in the fridge. Make a sandwich if you want, just clean up after. You're leaving? I don't work nights. Who does? You. She walked past me toward the door. I turned and watched her go. Deborah. She stopped, one hand on the door handle, didn't turn around. What happens if I don't follow the rules? She was quiet for a second. Then, you won't last long enough to find out. The door opened. The bell rang. She left. I stood there in the empty cafe with a box of gloves, a massive bag of salt, and a list of rules that made my chest tight. That was it. No training, no walkthrough. Just me. The shift started slow. I sat behind the front desk in the motel lobby, a cramped little space with a wooden counter, a stool that squeaked, and a rotary phone that looked older than me. The lobby radio sat on a shelf to my right, a boxy plastic thing from the 80s with a cassette deck built in. It was already on when I got there, playing something low and static-filled. Couldn't make out the station. The guest ledger sat under the counter in a plastic sleeve. I didn't touch it. Didn't even look at it for the first hour. The cafe connected to the lobby through an interior door. I'd checked it earlier, still smelled like fryer grease and coffee, but the lights were off now and the jukebox sat silent in the corner. No guests checked in. Nobody called. The building was quiet in a way that felt too complete. No hum from the vents, no creaking pipes. Just the low static from the radio and the occasional pop of the fluorescent light overhead. I'd made a sandwich around 9:30. White bread, deli turkey I found in the cafe fridge, a little mustard. Deborah was right about cleaning up. I wiped down the counter, put everything back, and washed the knife in the sink. It felt strange doing that in a place that wasn't mine, but I didn't want to break any unspoken rules on top of the ones already listed. At 10:40, I checked the parking lot through the front window. Empty except for my Honda, still parked crooked near the cafe entrance. At 11:15, I walked the hallway to check the rooms. 10 doors total, all painted the same dingy white. Room 7 was near the middle. The number was brass, tarnished. I didn't stop. Didn't even slow down, just noted it and kept walking. All the hallway lights worked. I counted them. 8 fixtures, all buzzing faintly. I got back to the desk and sat down. The quiet pressed in. I thought about my phone locked in Deborah's drawer. About the fact that I couldn't call anyone even if I wanted to. About William cruising past my old apartment. Maybe talking to my neighbors, maybe piecing together where I went. He wouldn't find me here, not in the middle of nowhere, not in a place with a population of 4. That thought should have been comforting. It wasn't. I checked my watch. 11:53. The rules said no unlocking the door after 12:10. That gave me 17 minutes. I wondered if anyone would show up in that window. Wondered what I'd do if they did. Probably just check them in. Write their name in the ledger with the blue gloves on. Give them a key. Point them to their room. Normal stuff. Midnight came and went. The radio kept playing. I didn't recognize the songs. They all sounded halfway between country and static. I leaned back on the stool and stared at the ceiling. Water-stained tiles, cracks in the corners. 12:10, the cutoff. I was alone now. Officially. No one could come in. No one could leave, I guessed, unless they already had a key. The building settled around me. That's what it felt like. Like it was adjusting to the fact that I was the only one awake. I didn't like that feeling. At 12:15, I got up and checked the hallway again. Same as before. Quiet. Empty. All the lights still working. I went back to the desk and sat down. 12:20, 12:30, 12:45. Nothing happened. I started thinking maybe this job was just boring. Maybe the rules were weird, but the actual work was just sitting here doing nothing for 8 hours. I could handle that. I'd done worse. Then, at 12:06, headlights swept across the front window. I sat up. A truck pulled into the lot. Older model, pickup, dark paint, maybe blue or black. Hard to tell under the floodlights. It stopped right in front of the lobby. Engine cut off. I watched. The driver's side door opened. A man got out. Tall, broad shoulders. Wore a denim jacket and jeans. Couldn't see his face clearly through the glass. But he was looking right at the lobby. Right at me. He walked up to the door and stopped just outside. Didn't try the handle. Didn't knock. Just stood there, waiting. The man raised one hand in a half wave. Not threatening. Just casual. "Hey there," he said through the glass. His voice came muffled, but clear enough. "Name's Braden Murphy. I'm with Desert Star Roadside Assistance, out of 29 Palms." I didn't say anything. He gestured back toward his truck. "Dispatch won't pick up. Radio's dead. Phone's got no signal out here. I just need to use your payphone for a minute. Call in my location. Let them know I'm off route." Made sense. Totally reasonable request. The kind of thing you'd help someone with without thinking twice. My hand moved toward the desk drawer where I'd seen Deborah pull the door key earlier. Then I stopped. Rule 2. Anyone asks to use the payphone, tell them it's out of order. Revised Rule 4. If anyone asks for the payphone, unplug it and put it behind the coffee machine in the cafe. I pulled my hand back. "Payphone's out of order," I said, loud enough to carry through the door. Braden nodded slowly. Patient. I figured it might be. Old place like this. But if I could just try it, maybe jiggle the coin return or something. I've gotten plenty of dead phones working before. "Can't help you," I said. He tilted his head. Still calm. Still reasonable. "Look, I get it. Late night, stranger at the door. I'm not asking you to let me in. Just bring the phone to the window here. Let me see if I can work with it through the glass. Won't take a minute." I should have just said no again. Stayed at the desk. Instead, I stood up and walked into the cafe through the connecting door. The payphone hung on the wall near the restrooms. Old rotary style. Beige plastic, yellowed with age. The cord ran down to the baseboard. I grabbed the receiver and pulled. The whole unit came off the wall mount easier than I expected. Weighed maybe 5 pounds. The cord was still plugged into the wall jack. I crouched down and yanked the plug out. "Hey, appreciate it," Braden called from the lobby. His voice carried through the open connecting door. "Just bring it to the glass. I'll take a look." I didn't answer. I walked to the counter and shoved the payphone behind the coffee machine, wedging it between the machine and the wall. The coiled handset cord tangled up, but I pushed the whole mess out of sight. My hands were shaking a little. From the adrenaline, probably. Or because some part of me knew this wasn't a normal interaction. I walked back to the lobby. Braden was still standing outside the door. Same spot, same patient expression. "Where'd the phone go?" he asked. Not angry, just curious. "Told you it's out of order." "Right, but I could still take a look at it. I've fixed plenty of equipment in the field. It's kind of what I do." "Can't help you," I said again. He nodded, took a breath, let it out slow. "Okay," he said. "I get it. You've got rules. Night shift rules, probably. Don't let anyone in, don't help strangers, all that. Makes sense. But here's the thing. I've been driving for 11 hours. Dispatch is supposed to check in every 4. I'm overdue. They're going to send someone looking for me, and when they can't find me, they're going to assume the worst. All I need is one phone call. 30 seconds, then I'm gone." I stayed quiet. "You seem like a decent guy," Braden continued. "You've got that look, like you've been on the other side of a locked door before, needing help. I'm just asking for the same thing you'd want someone to give you. That part got to me. Because he was right. I'd been that person. 2 days ago, actually, asking my landlord for 1 more week. But Deborah's voice was in my head. You won't last long enough to find out. Can't help you, I said for the 3rd time. Braden's expression didn't change. He just kept looking at me through the glass. His pale blue eyes steady, not blinking much. Bring me the phone, he said, still calm, still even. No. Just bring it to the window. No. The lobby radio clicked. Not a sound I'd heard it make before. All night it had been playing low static and occasional country songs, but this was different. A mechanical click, like someone changing the station manually. I looked over at it. The dial hadn't moved, but the sound coming out had changed. Silence now. Complete silence. Then another click. And the song started. Slow. A country waltz, guitar, and fiddle. But the drum beat was wrong. Came in half a second late, then rushed to catch up, then fell behind again, like a heartbeat skipping. Track 4. I moved, didn't think about it. Just turned and ran through the cafe toward the back hallway. The laundry room was the 3rd door on the left. Deborah had shown me during the tour I hadn't gotten. I grabbed the small brass key from my pocket, almost dropped it, got it into the lock and twisted. The door opened into darkness. I slapped the wall until I found the light switch, and a single bulb came on overhead. Washing machines along one wall, industrial dryer, wire shelving with folded linens, concrete floor, smell of detergent and rust. I yanked the door shut and braced my shoulder against it. The waltz kept playing. Clearer now, even through the walls. The fiddle sounded sharp, too high-pitched. The guitar underneath was deep enough that I could feel it in my chest. Then Braden's voice started. Not from outside the building anymore. From right on the other side of the laundry room door. I'm going to peel the skin off your hands first, he said. Same calm, measured tone he'd used to ask about the payphone. Start at the wrists, work my way down to the fingertips. It comes off easier than you'd think if you use a thin enough blade. Then I'll move to your face. The eyelids are delicate, so those go quick. The cheeks take longer. You'll still be conscious for most of it. That's the important part. You need to be awake. The door shuddered. Something heavy slammed into it from the lobby side. The frame rattled. I pushed harder with my shoulder, planted my feet. Another slam. The hinges groaned. I'll use a vegetable peeler for the thin strips, Braden continued, voice unchanged. Clinical, like he was reading from a manual. A potato peeler works too, but the blade's not as sharp. For the larger sections, I prefer a fillet knife. 6-inch blade, flexible. You can get it right under the dermis if you angle it correctly. The door shook again. Harder this time. My shoulder flared with pain where it pressed against the wood. I leaned my full weight into it. 170 pounds wasn't much, but it was all I had. The waltz kept playing. The crooked drumbeat stuttered and caught, stuttered and caught. Your fingernails will come off with pliers, Braden said. That's more for efficiency than anything else. Saves time. Then I'll start on the webbing between your fingers. That's sensitive. You'll feel everything. Slam. The whole frame jumped. I thought I heard wood crack, but the door held. My hands were slipping on the painted surface. Sweat or something else. I couldn't tell. After the hands and face, I'll move to the chest, Braden went on. Long strips, horizontal cuts. I'll make sure you can watch. I'll position you in front of a mirror so you can see exactly what's happening. It's better that way. More honest. Slam, slam, slam. 3 hits in rapid succession. The light bulb overhead flickered. My shoulder was numb now, feet sliding on the concrete. I tried to wedge my sneakers against the floor but couldn't get traction. The waltz reached what sounded like a chorus. The fiddle climbed higher and the crooked drums fell further behind. Then it stopped, just cut off mid-measure. The slamming stopped at the same instant. Complete silence. I stayed pressed against the door. Breathing hard, shoulder throbbing, hands still braced on the wood, nothing moved. I waited another 30 seconds with my shoulder pressed against the laundry room door before I moved. My hands were still shaking. I unlocked the door slow, turned the knob, and pushed it open just enough to see into the hallway. Nothing there. The lights buzzed overhead, same dingy white walls, same worn carpet runner down the middle. I stepped out and looked both ways, then walked back toward the lobby with the brass key still clenched in my fist. The radio was playing again. Regular static-filled country. Not the waltz, just the same low background noise it had been cycling through all night. I came around the corner into the lobby and stopped. The pickup was gone. I crossed to the front window and looked out at the parking lot. Just my Honda sitting crooked near the cafe entrance under the floodlights. No tire marks, no dust settling. The truck had been right there 5 minutes ago, and now it wasn't. The front door was still locked. I checked the deadbolt, still engaged. That's when I saw the footprints. They started about 3 feet inside the door, wet, clear impressions of bare feet on the white tile, toes and heel and arch all visible. They crossed the lobby in a straight line toward the hallway, each print getting slightly fainter but still wet enough to reflect the overhead light. No puddle by the door, no water dripping, no person. I stood there looking at them for a few seconds. My brain wanted to work out how someone could have come in without me hearing the door, how they could have walked across the lobby while I was in the laundry room where they'd gone. But I already knew what the rule said. Pour salt on wet footprints with no person attached. Don't follow them. Don't look for their source. I went back to the desk and grabbed the salt bag from where I'd left it next to the box of gloves. The binder clip came off easy. I walked back to the first print and tilted the bag. The salt poured out in a thin stream. I covered the first footprint completely, then moved to the next one. There were maybe 12 prints total, each one spaced like a normal walking stride. I worked my way across the lobby, pouring salt on each one until the bag felt lighter in my hands. The wetness reacted fast. It fizzed. Actual bubbles formed at the edges where the salt touched, tiny and rapid like peroxide on a cut. The wet darkened from clear to gray to almost black, and then it hardened. The whole footprint turned thin and brittle, almost like ice, but not cold. More like resin or glass. I finished the last print near the hallway entrance and stepped back. The footprints were still there, still visible, just frozen now in that weird, dark, hardened state, each one covered in a layer of damp salt. I didn't follow them into the hallway. I rolled the top of the salt bag shut, clipped it, and carried it back to the desk. My watch said 1:03 a.m. I'd been on shift for 3 hours, 5 more to go. I sat down on the stool. It squeaked. I put the salt bag on the floor next to the box of gloves and looked at the lobby. The frozen footprints reflected the light in small glints. The radio kept playing. The hallway stayed empty. I figured that was it for a while. It wasn't. At 1:10 a.m., the guest bell rang. It sat on the counter about a foot from my left elbow. The kind you smack with your palm to get someone's attention at a front desk. Chrome dome, round metal base, little button on top. I hadn't touched it all night. It rang once, sharp and clear. The metal dome vibrated for a second after. I looked at it, looked at the lobby, looked at the front door. Nobody there. The door was still locked. The parking lot was still empty through the window. No movement in the hallway. The bell just sat there on the counter doing nothing. I didn't touch it. At 1:20 a.m., it rang again. Same sharp sound, same vibration. I watched it the whole time and the button didn't move. It just rang anyway. My shoulders were still sore from bracing the laundry room door and my hands felt stiff. I kept them flat on the counter and waited. The bell stopped vibrating. The lobby stayed quiet except for the radio. At 1:23 a.m., the payphone buzzed. I heard it from the cafe, a low, rattling buzz like an old alarm clock. It came from behind the coffee machine where I'd wedged the unit after pulling it off the wall. The cord wasn't plugged in. I'd unplugged it myself. There was no power going to it. It buzzed again. Longer this time. I could hear the mechanical rattle of the ringer inside the housing. My hand moved toward my pocket. Pure reflex. I was reaching for my phone to check the time or look something up or just hold something familiar. My fingers hit the denim and I remembered. Deborah had it. Locked in the drawer at the far end of the counter. I'd handed it over before my shift started and she'd taken the key with her when she left. The payphone buzzed a third time. I pulled my hand back and put both palms flat on the counter again. I made myself sit there. Made myself look at the lobby, at the frozen footprints near the hallway, at the front door with nobody outside it. The buzzing stopped. I checked my watch. 1:25 a.m. Still almost 2 hours until I had to check the hallway lights at 3:15. The guest bell didn't ring again. The payphone stayed quiet. The radio cycled through another song that sounded halfway between static and steel guitar. I didn't move from the desk. At 1:45 a.m., someone appeared at the front door. I saw her through the glass. She wasn't there, and then she was. No car pulling up. No footsteps. Just suddenly standing right outside the door under the floodlights. A woman. Barefoot. Wearing a towel. She was maybe 5'5", real thin, with long dark hair that looked wet. It hung down past her shoulders and stuck to her face in places. Her skin was pale enough that the floodlights made her look almost gray. She had the towel wrapped around her body, the kind motels leave folded on the bathroom rack. White, a little too small. She knocked on the glass, 3 times. Polite. I stayed on the stool. She knocked again and then leaned closer to the door, putting one hand up to shade her eyes so she could see inside better. "Hey," she called. Her voice was muffled through the glass but clear enough. "Hey, I need help." I didn't say anything. "I'm a guest," she said. "I lost my key. I was in the shower and I thought I heard something outside and I came out to check and the door locked behind me. I'm in room 4. Can you let me in?" I looked at her. She looked back. Her eyes were pale too. Gray, maybe. Hard to tell through the glass. "Please," she said. "I'm freezing out here." It wasn't cold. It was desert night, probably still 70 degrees. She knocked again. "My name's Melissa Nichols. I checked in this afternoon. You can look it up. Room 4. The guest ledger was under the counter in its plastic sleeve. I hadn't opened it yet, hadn't put on the blue gloves. Deborah had been writing in it earlier when I first arrived, so there were guests. Probably. "Just let me in for a second," Melissa said. "I just need to get back to my room, that's it." I thought about the rules. Rule 1 on the first sheet. Don't open the front door after 10 p.m., except for registered guests with room keys or morning shift cafe employees. She said she was a registered guest. Said she lost her key. She didn't have a key on her. Couldn't have one. She was wearing a towel and nothing else. Rule 1 on the second sheet. Don't unlock the front door after 12:10 a.m. It was 1:45 a.m. "Please," Melissa said again. She put both hands on the glass. Her palms were pale and smooth. "I can't stay out here all night. Just open the door. I'll go straight to my room. You won't even have to deal with me." I sat there looking at her. She looked back. The rules said don't open the door after 12:10. They didn't say anything about guests locked out. Didn't say anything about exceptions. Just said don't unlock it. But Rule 1 on the first sheet said registered guests with room keys were allowed in after 10 p.m. So guests were supposed to be able to come in. If she was a guest. If she really lost her key. Melissa's expression changed. Less pleading. A little harder. "You gonna help me or not?" she said. I didn't move. She stared at me through the glass. I stared back. "Fine," she said. "Get the ledger. Check if I'm in there. Melissa Nichols, room 4. Then let me in." The ledger was right under the counter. The gloves were in the box next to the salt. I could check, could put the gloves on, pull out the ledger, look for her name. But it was after 12:10 a.m. "Don't unlock the front door." Melissa knocked again. Harder this time. The glass rattled in the frame. "Hey," she said. "I'm a paying guest. You can't just leave me out here." I kept looking at her. She kept looking at me. I had to decide what the rules actually meant. My hand moved toward the desk drawer. Just reflex. She looked that scared. The woman outside had both hands pressed against the glass now, not pounding, just flat there. Her shoulders were hunched up like she was cold. Her eyes kept darting to the side, toward the parking lot, then back to me. That kind of frightened you can't really fake. The kind that makes your whole body pull in on itself. I stood up from the stool. It squeaked. I took one step toward the door. She knocked again, softer this time. "Please," she said through the glass. "I think someone followed me from the shower." That stopped me. I looked past her at the parking lot. Nothing out there but my Honda and the floodlights and the empty dark beyond that. No movement, no headlights. I looked back at her. She was shivering now. The towel didn't cover much, and the night air out there probably wasn't warm. I could see goosebumps on her arms. My hand was already reaching for my pocket where I'd put the desk key after locking the door at 12:10. Rule 1 said don't unlock it except for registered guests with room keys or morning shift employees. She said she was a guest. She said she'd lost her key. That probably counted, right? I stopped with my fingers on the pocket seam. Something wasn't right. I looked down. Her feet were bare on the concrete just outside the door, pale against the dark ground. Completely dry. Toes, arches, heels, all of it dry. But her hair was soaked. Dripping wet. Water running down her neck and shoulders and soaking into the top edge of the towel. I looked past her again at the parking lot. The asphalt was wet, not just damp. Wet enough to reflect the floodlights in long streaks, like it had been raining. I hadn't heard rain. Hadn't heard anything except the radio. But the lot was wet and her hair was wet and her feet were bone dry. I pulled my hand away from my pocket. That's when I saw the footprints. They started about 6 feet behind her, out near where the sidewalk met the parking lot. Wet prints on the concrete. Shoes, not bare feet. The tread pattern caught the light. Regular geometric diamonds, work boot or sneaker style. They led straight toward the door, toward where I was standing inside. I looked down at my own feet. Black sneakers, same ones I'd been wearing for 2 days straight. Worn tread on the bottom, with that same diamond pattern. The prints outside were my size, my tread. I looked back up at the woman. She was still pressed against the glass, still shivering, still looking scared. But she wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking down, at the footprints. Another one appeared while I watched, just materialized on the concrete about a foot past the last one. Wet and fresh and perfectly clear. Nobody standing there making it. Just the print. Then another, closer to the door. They were walking toward me, copying my stride, my exact shoe. I took a step back from the door. The woman's eyes snapped up to my face. "You see them too," she said. Not a question. I didn't answer. I took another step back and hit the desk with my hip. The footprints kept coming. One every 2 seconds, maybe. Steady pace. They were about 3 feet from the door now. I held up one hand, palm out. Universal signal for stop, for wait, for I can't help you. "I can't open the door," I said, loud enough for her to hear through the glass. "Not after 12:10 a.m. It's the rules." Her expression changed, not gradually, just flipped, like switching channels. The fear went away. The shivering stopped. She straightened up and pulled her hands off the glass, leaving 2 palm prints that started to fade immediately. Her face went flat, empty. Then something else moved into it. Not anger exactly, more like irritation. Like I'd failed a test she'd expected me to pass. "Check the guest ledger," she said. Her voice was different too. Still quiet, but not scared anymore. Matter of fact, almost bored. I didn't move. "Check it," she said again. She tilted her head a little, watching me. "You'll want to see." I looked down at the desk. The ledger was still under the counter where Deborah had left it, tucked into a clear plastic sleeve. I hadn't touched it all night. Hadn't needed to. Nobody had checked in. I looked back at the woman. She smiled. Not friendly, just lips pulling back from teeth. "Go on," she said. I didn't want to, but I also wanted her to stop looking at me like that. And I wanted to know why she thought the ledger mattered. I crouched down and grabbed the box of blue nitrile gloves from next to the salt bag. My hands were still a little shaky. Took me 2 tries to pull a glove out. I got both gloves on, snapped them at the wrists, then reached under the counter. The plastic sleeve crinkled when I pulled it out. I set it on the counter and slid the ledger free. It was warm, not like it had been sitting near a heater. Warm like skin, like something alive had been holding it. I almost dropped it. Didn't. Just held it with both gloved hands and stared at the cover. Plain black binding, no title. The corners were worn soft. I opened it. The first page had lines for guest information. Name, date, room number, duration of stay. Standard stuff. But the handwriting kept changing. First entry was neat blue ink. Name, Robert Chen. Room 2, checked in March 9th. Except someone had crossed out the name. Not just a single line through it. Scratched out. Gouged through the paper with enough pressure that the pen tore straight through and left ragged edges. Second entry, different handwriting, black ink. Sarah Kulkarni. Room 6, March 15th. Crossed out the same way. The page was ripped where the pen had dug in. Third entry, pencil. Marcus. Couldn't read the last name because it was obliterated. Room 3. The crossing out had torn a hole the size of a dime. I flipped the page. More of the same. Different names, different hands. All of them destroyed. Some pages had 4 or 5 entries. Some had just 1. Every single name was crossed out with that same violent pressure. I kept flipping. The entries got more recent. Dates from last month, last week, 3 days ago. Then I got to the last page with writing on it. The newest entry was in blue ink, neat block letters, very precise. It said, Blake Barnes, room 4, indefinite stay. I read it twice. Didn't make sense the second time either. I hadn't signed anything. Deborah had written my name down on a notepad when she took my license, but I hadn't touched the ledger. Hadn't even known it existed until she mentioned the rules about wearing gloves. But there it was. My name. Room 4. Indefinite. In handwriting I didn't recognize. I looked up. The woman outside was still watching me through the glass. Still smiling that not smile. "See?" she said. Movement caught my eye. Not from her. From the left. There was a mirror on the wall behind the desk, about 4 feet wide and 3 feet tall in a tarnished gold frame. I'd noticed it earlier, but hadn't really looked at it. Just part of the lobby furniture. I looked at it now. I could see the back of my own head and shoulders. The desk in front of me, the lobby behind me stretching back toward the hallway, and the woman, standing inside, behind me, maybe 3 feet back, too close, way too close. But the position was wrong. In the mirror, she was off to my right, almost at the hallway entrance. In real life, she was outside the front door, which was to my left. I could see her face in the reflection. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her mouth was open a little and her eyes were too wide. Her head was tilted at an angle that didn't look right. too far, like her neck was broken. I spun around. The lobby was empty. Nobody behind me. Nobody by the hallway. Just the frozen footprints near the entrance, the radio on its shelf, the front door with its deadbolt still engaged. I turned back to the door. She was still outside, still standing there in her towel with her wet hair and dry feet, still watching me. She raised one hand and pressed it against the glass, held it there, waiting. At 2:05 a.m. the radio clicked, not the same click as before, different, sharper, like someone flipped a switch with purpose. The static cut out completely, just silence for maybe 3 seconds. Then it came back as this low hum, steady and deep, vibrating through the shelf and into the counter. I felt it in my jaw first, then my teeth. That ache you get when you're on a plane and the pressure won't equalize, except it kept building. I reached up and pressed my hand against my jaw. Didn't help. The hum stayed consistent, no variation, just that one note drilling into my skull. I stood up from the stool, which squeaked, and looked at the radio. The dial hadn't moved. The volume knob was in the same position it had been all night, but the sound kept going, and my molars were starting to hurt for real. I thought about unplugging it. Rule 7 said, let the jukebox play. Don't unplug it. Nothing about the radio. But Deborah had left it on when she'd gone, and I figured that meant something. I sat back down, put my hands flat on the counter and tried to ignore the ache spreading up into my temples. That's when I saw the first footprint. In the hallway, right at the far end where it turned toward the back rooms. Wet, barefoot. Just appeared on the carpet runner, darker than the rest of the dingy fabric. I leaned forward, squinting. Another print formed, right in front of the first one. Normal stride, like someone walking. Nobody there. Just the print appearing, wet and clear. Toes and arch and heel. Then another, closer. I stood up fast enough that the stool scraped backward and nearly tipped. The hum from the radio got louder for a second, or maybe I just noticed it more because my heart was hammering and my teeth felt like they were vibrating. The footprints kept forming, one every 2 seconds or so. Walking toward the lobby in a straight line down the center of the hallway. I remembered the rule. Pour salt on wet footprints with no person attached. Don't follow them. Don't look for their source. But these weren't in the lobby yet. They were still in the hall. I grabbed the salt bag from under the counter, rolled the top open. My hands were shaking again, and some of it spilled on the floor by my feet. The footprints kept coming. Slow, steady. Getting closer to the point where the hallway opened into the lobby. I didn't want them in here. That thought just hit me clean and simple. I didn't want whatever was making those prints to cross into this space. The lobby was mine. My post. The desk. The rules said stay here, don't leave, don't let certain things in. The rules were about keeping a boundary intact. That clicked in my head the same way the radio had clicked. Clear and sharp and obvious. I looked at the threshold between the hallway and the lobby. Just an open archway. No door. No physical barrier. The footprints were maybe 6 feet away now. I ran to the archway, nearly tripped over one of the frozen prints from earlier that I'd salted down, caught myself on the wall. The bag of salt was heavy and awkward in my arms. I tore the binder clip off completely, let it drop, tipped the bag, and poured a thick line of salt right across the threshold. Straight line, corner to corner, maybe 2 inches wide and piled high enough that it looked like a speed bump. I stepped back into the lobby, breathing hard, and watched. The next footprint formed in the hallway, right at the edge of the salt line. Then it stopped. No more prints appeared. Just that one, sitting there at the boundary, wet and glistening under the hallway lights. The hum from the radio shifted lower. My teeth stopped aching. I stood there holding the salt bag, watching the line. The salt started to bow inward, not like wind was hitting it, like pressure, like something heavy was pushing from the other side even though I couldn't see anything. the line bent in the middle, grains sliding and shifting. But it didn't break. It held. The pressure kept going. The salt curved more, forming this shallow arc pointing into the lobby. I could see the individual grains moving, rolling over each other, but the line stayed continuous. I didn't move. The wet footprint on the other side didn't move either. Just sat there, waiting. After maybe 30 seconds, the pressure stopped. The salt settled. The line was still there. Thinner in the middle, but intact. The hum from the radio faded back to regular static. I rolled the top of the salt bag shut. Didn't have the clip anymore, so I just twisted it tight and set it on the floor next to the desk. My watch said 2:12 a.m. I sat back down on the stool and kept my eyes on that salt line. At 2:30 a.m., headlights swept across the front window. I looked up. A sedan. Dark color, maybe gray or brown, older model with a dented front bumper. It came into the lot fast, tires crunching on gravel, and pulled up crooked right in front of the door. The engine cut off. The headlights stayed on for a second, then went dark. Driver's side door opened. William Mills stepped out. I recognized him instantly. Tall, built, close-cropped black hair, scar through his left eyebrow, windbreaker and work pants and heavy boots. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up. He walked straight to the door and grabbed the handle, yanked it hard. The door rattled in the frame but didn't open. Deadbolt held. William yanked again. Then he leaned close to the glass, cupped his hands around his face, and looked directly at me. I stood up. My brain wasn't working right. He was here. He'd found me. Again. I held up both hands and waved them back and forth. No. Go. Leave. William just stared at me. I pointed at him, then pointed down the road. Tried to mouth the words, "You need to go." He stepped back from the door, turned, walked to his car. I thought for half a second he was actually leaving. Then he opened the trunk and pulled out a tire iron. My hands went to my pockets. No keys. Deborah had them. No phone. Deborah had that too. The back office was through the cafe, and I didn't know if it had a lock on the outside. William walked back to the door, tire iron in his right hand. That's when the woman appeared next to him. Melissa, still in the towel, hair still wet. She drifted up from the side of the building, not walking exactly, just sort of sliding into place beside him. She said something I couldn't hear through the glass. William looked at her, then back at me. Melissa kept talking. Her mouth moved. Her hand reached out and touched his arm. William looked down at her hand, then at the door. He raised the tire iron. I backed up, hit the desk, grabbed the edge of it with both hands. Melissa smiled. William swung. The glass exploded inward with this huge crashing sound that filled the whole lobby, shards spraying across the tile and the desk and hitting my arms. I threw my hands up over my face. When I looked again, there was a jagged hole in the door big enough for an arm. William reached through, fingers stretching toward the deadbolt. The lock turned. Click. The door swung open. Melissa moved first. Not walking. Not floating. Something worse. Her body stretched, elongated like someone was pulling her from both ends, and her limbs bent wrong, too many joints, and her face stayed perfectly still with that smile locked in place. She rushed through the door, not alone. The wet footprints came with her, dozens of them, all forming at once in a chaotic cluster, overlapping, stepping on each other, bare feet and boot treads and something with claws. No bodies, just prints flooding into the lobby like a crowd I couldn't see. I spun around, grabbed the ledger off the desk. The nitrile gloves were still on my hands from before, damp with sweat but intact. I flipped the ledger open to the last page. My name, Blake Barnes, room 4, indefinite stay. I pulled a pen from the cup on the desk, scratched through my name, hard, The ink tore through the paper. William was coming through the door now, tire iron still in his hand, eyes locked on me. I wrote as fast as I could, William Mills. Room 4. The ink bled into the paper, not spreading like a stain, sinking, like the page was drinking it. William lunged. He hit the salt line at the threshold. Not the one I'd poured for the hallway. That one was still there. This was the frozen prints from earlier, the ones I'd salted down when they'd first appeared, scattered across the lobby floor between the door and the desk. His boot came down on one. The hardened resin cracked under his weight. I grabbed the big salt bag, tore it open completely, and dumped it onto his boots and the clustered prints swarming around his feet. The reaction was instant, hissing, loud, like water hitting a hot pan. The wet footprints started bubbling where the salt touched them, fizzing and darkening, but they didn't harden this time. They moved. The wetness climbed up William's boots, spreading over the leather, crawling up toward his ankles. William looked down, tried to step back. He couldn't. His boots were stuck to the floor, held in place by the massive prints beneath him, and the wetness kept rising. It wrapped around his calves like something liquid and alive, black and glistening under the overhead lights. He swung the tire iron at me, missed by a foot. His balance was off. Then he started sliding backward, not toward the door, toward the hallway. His boots scraped across the tile, dragging through the glass shards and the spilled salt, leaving 2 long streaks. He grabbed at the desk with his free hand, missed, grabbed at the door frame. His fingers caught the edge for a second. The wetness pulled harder. His hand slipped. He went backward fast, boots skidding, arms pinwheeling, and he hit the salt line at the hallway threshold. It didn't stop him. He crossed it, and the wet footprints swarmed after him, flooding into the hall in this dense, chaotic mass. The wetness was up to his knees now, climbing higher, and he was yelling something I couldn't make out over the hissing. Melissa was still in the lobby, standing near the broken door, watching. Then the radio clicked. I knew that click. Track 4 started playing. The waltz. Slow guitar and fiddle and drums that couldn't keep time. I ran, straight through the cafe, past the counter where I'd hidden the payphone, into the back hallway. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the brass key, got it in the lock, turned it, shoved the laundry room door open, stumbled inside, slammed it shut behind me. I braced my shoulder against the door and planted my feet on the concrete. The waltz played, louder than before. The fiddle was climbing higher and the drums were falling further behind, and I could feel the bass guitar vibrating through the walls into my chest. Then I heard it, scraping, right outside the door, not pounding, not slamming. A pen, on paper, slow, deliberate. The scratch of ink dragging across a page, forming letters, filling in a name. I pressed harder against the door. My boots slipped a little. I dug my heels in and pushed with everything I had. The scratching continued. I could hear the pen lift, move, press down again. Another stroke. My name, I thought. She's writing my name in the ledger. But I'd already crossed it out. I'd written Williams. The scratching stopped. The waltz kept playing. The fiddle hit a note so high it made my eyes water. Then the music cut off, mid-measure, just like before. Silence. I stayed against the door, counted to 30 in my head. Didn't hear anything on the other side. Slowly I stepped back, unlocked the door, pushed it open just enough to see. The hallway was empty. I walked back toward the lobby, brass key still clenched in my fist. The front door was open. Broken glass covered the tile near the entrance, reflecting the overhead lights in 1,000 tiny points. The salt line at the hallway threshold was piled higher than I'd left it, maybe 4 inches tall now, pushed into this steep ridge facing the hall. No wet footprints in the lobby, none in the hallway, no William, no Melissa. The ledger was still on the desk where I'd left it, open to the page with my name scratched out, and William's name written below in my handwriting. The tire iron was on the floor near the door. I checked my watch. 3:40 a.m. I sat down on the stool. It squeaked. My hands were still shaking and my shoulder was already starting to bruise from holding the door. The radio played static and low country music. Normal. No hum. I stayed at the desk and didn't move until the sky outside started turning gray. At 5:50 a.m., headlights came into the lot. I looked up. A truck this time. White. Deborah got out of the driver's side. A man I didn't know got out of the passenger side, shorter and stocky with dark hair, wearing a stained cafe shirt and carrying a plastic bucket. They walked to the door. Deborah looked at the broken glass, the open door, the tire iron on the floor. Didn't react. Just stepped over the glass and came inside. The man followed her, setting the bucket down near the entrance. It was full of cleaning supplies, rags and spray bottles and a dustpan. Deborah walked to the desk, looked at me, looked at the ledger. I stood up, pulled off the nitrile gloves. They were damp and stuck to my fingers. Deborah picked up the ledger, flipped to the page with William's name. The paper was torn where I'd scratched through my own name, and the ink had bled through to the next page, leaving a dark stain. She studied it for maybe 10 seconds. Then she nodded. Just once. Like I'd done exactly what I was supposed to. She closed the ledger, set it back in the plastic sleeve, pulled a key ring from her belt and unlocked the drawer at the far end of the counter. My phone was inside. She handed it to me. I took it. The battery was still at 8%, same as when I'd given it to her. Deborah reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the laminated rule sheet. She unfolded it, and I saw that my name had been removed from the top line where she'd written it yesterday, just blank space now. She handed me the sheet. You kept the boundary intact. I looked at the paper, then at her. What happens to him? Room 4 had a vacancy. Her voice was flat, matter of fact. Now it doesn't. The man with the bucket started sweeping up glass. The sound of the bristles on tile was loud in the quiet lobby. The book's balanced, Deborah said. Place will reset by noon. She pulled a set of car keys from her other pocket. Mine. I recognized the Honda keychain. Filled your tank, she said. You're clear to go. I took the keys. My hands were still shaking a little. Deborah walked past me toward the cafe, stopped at the threshold, looked back. You did good, she said. Most people don't make it through the first night. Then she kept walking. The man kept sweeping. I stood there holding my phone and my keys and the rules sheet with my name erased. I walked out through the broken door. The sun was just starting to come up over the desert, turning the sky pale orange and pink. My Honda was right where I'd left it, still parked crooked near the cafe entrance. I got in, started the engine. It turned over smooth. The gas gauge showed full. I pulled out of the lot and headed west toward Ludlow. Didn't look back at Roy's in the rear view. Didn't want to see if the door looked whole again or if the neon was still steady. Just drove. The sky got lighter. The road stretched out empty in front of me. I had both hands on the wheel and my phone charging in the cup holder and nowhere I needed to be. My palms were itching. I looked down at a red light just outside Ludlow, faint outlines on my skin, like wet footprints. Toes and arch and heel pressed into my palms in pale gray marks. I watched them while the light stayed red. The marks faded, dried back into normal skin, just my hands, nothing else. The light turned green. I kept driving.